Clarice, or whoever else is watching. Hi friends, and welcome back to Cammie's Corner and another installment of Harrowing horror. This month we are diving into The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris. It was written in 1988 and is considered a psychological horror. It is written in first-person point of view. The place settings vary, but our place settings of continuous revisit are going to be Quantico, which is located in Virginia, as well as Baltimore, Maryland, and the end of our story finds us in Ohio. The year is to be considered present day, as in early on in chapter 2 we do get a story, or a backstory if you will, of Hannibal Lecter, or Hannibal the Cannibal, and we are taken to about July 8th, 1976, so it's fairly close in proximity to our publication date. It is comprised of 367 pages broken down into 61 chapters. Your price range is going to vary depending on your publication year and the type, whether you have paperback or hardcover. This go around, my most expensive copy I found was $3,250 for a Subterranean Press, which is a lettered edition. On average, your first edition hardcover copies average about $300. Or you can get an awesome paperback like this, which Stacy found me for only 10 cents at her local thrift bookstore, which is pretty cool. So of course your ISBN numbers will vary depending on your publication date. Our writing style is informal. Now, just to set the premise, this is number 2 in the Hannibal Lecter series. The first book, which came out in 1981, is called Red Dragon, and it is on the Harrowing horror list of 100 greatest horror novels of all time. But you guys know that I pick my books randomly, so we will eventually get to Red Dragon. If you are continuing on in the Hannibal Lecter series, this book is so preceded by Hannibal, which came out in 2001, and followed that by Hannibal Rising, which came out in 2006. There is a movie adaptation based on The Silence of the Lambs, and that is this 1991 version. This was actually the third film in Oscar history to win the following 5 Academy Awards. This one for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Sir Anthony Hopkins, Best Actress, Miss Jodie Foster, and Best Screenplay. That's incredible, and honestly I think it deserves every single one. It's very rare, especially in horror, when you get a movie adaptation of the book that it is so closely related. I can honestly say that watching this movie again after having read the book, because this was the first time that I read The Silence of the Lambs, that the storyline flowed so well. I honestly felt that I was watching the book, and that's a pretty cool thing. So I can see why it definitely won for Best Picture and Best Director. And then of course Sir Anthony Hopkins and young Jodie Foster just did this so well. I did also, in conjunction with reading the book, because I consumed the book in one day, I decided to go ahead and take on the audio version of this as well. So through my Overdrive app, through my local library, I listened to the audio version of The Silence of the Lambs narrated by Kathy Bates. That I also flew through super quick. It's only 3 hours and 3 minutes, but it was so good, you guys. If you have never listened to the audio version by Kathy Bates, I highly recommend it, because she is really good at differentiating the characters, and she has great dialects for each distinctive character, and she does Clarice so well. So with that, let's dive into our characters and our story setting, and we'll just kind of take it layer by layer. So of course, Hannibal the Cannibal, or the Chesapeake Ripper as he's also known, Dr. Hannibal Lecter, is the main character of the series. However, I think he takes a backseat to Clarice Starling in this particular book. Now again, I've never read Red Dragon, and I'm not here to do a comparison because we haven't gotten there yet, or at least I haven't. And so here I'm just going to take the story for what it is. Hannibal Lecter, of course, is a respected Baltimore socialite. He's a renowned forensic psychiatrist. He's extremely intelligent. He is in fact a cannibal and a psychopathic serial killer. He is also known, as I stated, as the Chesapeake Ripper, and is referred to by most in the FBI realm as Hannibal the Cannibal. Now, the correlation between Dr. Hannibal Lecter with what I consider to be the main character of this story is that of Clarice Starling. Clarice Starling is an FBI cadet with kind of I wouldn't necessarily call it a troubled past, but it's definitely a questionable past with troubled dealings. And she kind of takes center stage in this story because she is just that, a cadet who's pulled out of the academy by that of Chief Jack Crawford. Now, in the movie, he is played by Scott Glenn, and I think that was a great representation of that character as well. Now, Crawford is the agent in charge of behavioral science at the FBI headquarters. Now, behavioral science at the FBI is a section that deals with serial murderers. He specifically calls out Clarice, which I find kind of humorous in a sense starting off, because she's excited about the opportunity, but you always get the underlying sense that she's very concerned whether or not she's going to be able to finish the academy. And so that always seems to be, despite given this fantastic opportunity at being a real FBI investigator, you just constantly see her refer back to, okay, well, is this going to get me back to the academy? Because you can kind of see right away that she thinks that this mission, if you would like to call it that, is going to fail, that Dr. Hannibal Lecter is not going to speak with her and she's not going to obtain the information that she's been sent to recover. So in the back of her mind, she just wants to be successful at what Crawford has requested of her and get back to the academy and graduate. One thing to point out right from the beginning is stoicism throughout the novel, and this starts with what I consider also to be a main character in that of Jack Crawford, because while he is trying to focus on this FBI investigation and pulling Starling out of the academy and dealing with all this and getting all his P's and Q's lined up, he is facing the imminent death of his wife, and he's very cognizant of this, and he's trying to not let it overcome or overwhelm the situation at hand, because he knows the importance of staying focused on the task. This kind of ties into our main character Clarice, because she, in fact, during this initial opportunity, needs to learn how to separate her past and personal life from her current present situation and that of on the job. Part of that is taken as a naivety, because she isn't in fact an FBI investigator. She hasn't even graduated the academy. So as the reader, you kind of take that into account and think, okay, well, she's not a real investigator yet. She doesn't know all the ins and outs. So if she kind of flubs, we can give her a pass, so to speak. But one of the interesting things that you have to latch onto is, okay, we can give her a pass, but look at the dynamic of the one person that she is set to interview, and that is one of the sickest psychopaths known to the FBI, Hannibal the Cannibal. So she really doesn't have a lot of room for error, and I think that she inevitably becomes aware of this, and as she maybe says a little too much or says stuff that she maybe shouldn't have said to him, she kind of steps back and rewords her own wording to give him a little quid pro quo, which is a little of what he wants in exchange for a little of what she wants. So she learns very quickly how to play the game. But we essentially have what I'm going to call as the setup from Crawford to Starling. And, you know, as indicated, he does pull her out of the academy and is in fact her mentor. She says this up front. She had seen a lecture that he had done, and so she's kind of always held him in the forefront of importance as far as the FBI is concerned. So when Crawford asks her to interview Hannibal Lecter at the Baltimore State Hospital, Lecter gets very clever, knowing kind of the situation that he's been set up for. Let's face it, Dr. Lecter is extremely intelligent. He's been here before. He has been interviewed by multiple people. You even get the sense that he's kind of an attraction at the mental institution, because people that are in the field of psychiatry want to interview him. He still receives mail there like a normal person. He interacts very differently than most patients would with the staff, and he's very isolated from everyone else given his mental state and the fact that he is quite dangerous. So Lecter uses this opportunity with Clarice as kind of an opportunity for advancement for her, but also for himself. And he offers to give her information on a cold case, allowing her to kind of work as an FBI investigator. So then she takes on this new role. Now I call this a setup because is it in fact to her benefit to take this on, or is there more to the story? And of course, when you're dealing with a psychopath, there is always more to the story. It is not just face value. Now it's also stated throughout the narration of this story that Clarice is very attractive, and you kind of get the sense that she is subjected to this misogynistic behavior regardless of the setting and who she encounters. You see this when she meets Dr. Chilton for the first time. He is the administrator at the Baltimore Psychiatric Hospital, and her first meeting with him, he's already hitting on her, asking her if she's going to be in Baltimore for a while. As a female, you do kind of get used to that happening, and I know that that sounds conceited, but please don't take it that way. But unfortunately, in any given situation, when you find yourself isolated from your constituents, if there is a male on the other side of that table who is in any way authoritative, you always, in the back of your mind, kind of set yourself up for the what if scenario. Am I going to be asked out? Am I going to be, you know, hit on in a creepy way? Is he going to say something that's going to creep me out, you know? And I keep using the term creep because Chilton does in fact creep me out, and I love the fact that the movie adaptation held on to that even more. He did creep me out. He did give me that sense of feeling uncomfortable, and I guess maybe that's the term I'm going for. As a female, you often feel uncomfortable in professional situations because of the fact that despite the fact that you might be in charge, or you might be sent with the notion that you're in charge, men often don't see it that way. And if you're a man watching this, please don't take this as a, you know, I'm female, hear me roar kind of thing. It's definitely not that. But I think that all women can relate to Clarice in this situation, because unfortunately we do live in a man's world. That hasn't changed, and I don't think that mindset is ever going to change. I think that with the current social movement, you are seeing men being held accountable more for their actions, which is a fantastic thing, in moderation. We need to find a balance. We can't just condemn and throw all men in the fire and burn them at the stake. I mean, you know, if it merits, that's one thing. And I'm not trying to get off topic here, but in reference to Clarice, regardless of whatever situation she is set up with, she is put in a predatory feeling. You get that sense of sexual predation, you know, that she's kind of eye candy, whether it be from Dr. Chilton, from the orderly Barney, from Miggs, the schizophrenic weirdo that eventually, at the behest of Lecter, commits suicide. She is just constantly being sexualized in this story, and not in an over-the-top kind of way, but just enough that as a female reading it, you do get a creep factor. So Lecter, of course, gives her an opportunity by giving her a little tidbit on a cold case on Benjamin Raspiel, who he eventually admits or succumbs to the information that he is the lover of Klaus. Now, Klaus is this cold case that we're kind of working on. Clarice kind of takes in this information because in the back of her mind, she sees this as an opportunity to kind of shine. She was sent here just to simply fill out a questionnaire with Dr. Lecter, and if she comes back with information on a cold case, then she could possibly put herself in a completely different situation. So she begins working as a federal investigator under Crawford's direction, but she continually faces constraints from her constituents and gets this bureaucratic stonewalling every opportunity she gets. So Again, kind of going back to what I was saying before, sometimes as a female, you have to work twice as hard because you are doing what a man would do, but you're a pretty girl doing it, so it can't be taken serious. Or, you know, being that she was already at a disadvantage of not really being a real investigator, then she had extra jabs constantly being thrown at her, almost like she was being treated as a little girl at times. And that wears on a person. You know, you think that you're doing great things and you think that you're achieving greatness, and every time you turn around and you're looking for props from your coworkers, you're constantly getting the snares and the jeers like, oh, you don't deserve that. So I'm rooting for Clarice this whole time. Now, initially when Clarice went to question Dr. Lecter, it was to find out information on a current FBI investigation on that of Buffalo Bill. Now, Buffalo Bill, we come to know him as Jamie Gumb. He is a serial killer in the making. He is a transsexual man who is all about beauty and vanity and everything it is to be beautiful and glamorous. He is a seamstress. He has the knack and flair for fashion, but he is not happy in his own skin. So when one is not happy in their own skin, what do? They collect the skins of others. He literally skins, as they say in the text, his humps. So as Clarice is having these encounters with Lecter thus far, she is trying to obtain information from Lecter regarding the pattern of Buffalo Bill. She gets the sense that Lecter knows a little bit more about Buffalo Bill than he's leading on. However, Lecter, in true psychopathic fashion, is kind of leading her astray by offering her a bone, if you will, about this Raspel case, and not exactly giving her everything she wants about the Buffalo Bill case, all the while manipulating it so that he can intertwine the two, because inevitably they are sort of interconnected in a way. Now, during the second interview, when Crawford takes Clarice to West Virginia, you do see for the first time Crawford use Clarice's beauty, or her sexuality, if you will, to his own benefit. And that is, there is a use for Clarice at that moment to get the sheriff alone to talk. And so for a moment, I do lose a little bit of respect for Crawford, because I think inevitably with the loss of his wife, he does kind of take Clarice under his wing. But you do see at the end of the day, he's still just a man, and he treats Clarice in a less than professional way. Even though it's minute, it still sticks out with you. With the new information during the second interview that Clarice obtained regarding Benjamin Raspel's car, she realizes that now she's kind of up against some time constraints. That if she is going to in fact take this on and kind of go all in and be an FBI investigator on the cold case, in addition to working on the current investigation on Buffalo Bill, she really has a very short amount of time, a total of 3 hours and 45 minutes to go and trace Raspel's car and get what she needs to get done regarding the Buffalo Bill case. So just as they feel that they have gotten a grasp on this Buffalo Bill case, then Senator Ruth Martin's daughter, Catherine, gets kidnapped by Buffalo Bill. So then this escalates, because now Ruth, who is the senator, is using that position of power to say, hey, this is more than just a girl getting kidnapped, this is my daughter. So she's kind of put the value of her life a little bit higher than the other previous victims, because now it's personal. So we have yet another turning point in our story. So it's during this second interview that Clarice puts herself in a situation. So we know now that Catherine has been kidnapped by Buffalo Bill. So it is during a very quick, heated, intense end of conversation between Clarice and Dr. Lecter that Dr. Lecter advises Clarice that his wish is to be removed from his current situation, which he's kind of displaced from the rest of the mental hospital anyways, and he wants his view back. Now again, his situation is already quite lax for the severity of why he's in the mental institution, but Clarice uses this as her advantage. She lies to Lecter and says that she's made a deal with the senator to remove him from his current situation, to have him extradited to a different location to have a room with a view. It's during this conversation that Buffalo Bill is preparing Catherine for her final execution. Crawford decides to go ahead and send Clarice to interview Lecter one last time. During this last interview, that Chilton starts to get a little intrusive between Crawford's direction to Clarice and kind of where he wants himself to be in this mix, because he houses Lecter and he feels that he's kind of getting the short end of the stick. So he attempts to make her wear a wire and get all of the details of their intimate conversation. It is here that Clarice falters. She does give a little bit of inside information, personal information to Lecter, and it's during that she doesn't realize that she's kind of given Lecter the upper hand on her, because the last thing that you want to do when you are dealing with a psychopath is let them in here. As soon as you let them in here, that's all they need, because that's kind of their way of pulling the strings. To a puppet is kind of the visual that I'm going with there. If you give them a little, they have that ability to kind of just move you along and give you so much in order to get what they want at the same time. So she advises Lecter that she has Crawford's made-up offer of relocation, and Lecter begins to extract more information from her, not only about her life, but he wants to know more about her father. She initially had told Lecter that he was a policeman, but Lecter at this point is dumbing it down and saying no, he was not a policeman, was he? He was in fact a night marshal. So this is kind of in essence chipping away at her mentally as well, and she may or may not be cognizant of that at that point. This is also where you finally get the understanding of the title of our book, because she then takes us back to a childhood memory, and I think that this was all very natural and very innocent. I don't think that she necessarily was intending to open up to Lecter with this bit of information, but this is really something he holds near and dear. And she has this childhood memory of a slaughterhouse, and she's explaining the sounds, the blood-curdling sounds of these lambs and how they've stuck with her, and they, in essence, they you know, haunt her dreams, and they keep her up sometimes at night. And we'll see Lecter revisit that at a later time. Now we have kind of a turning point in our story here once again, because Clarice has learned of Chilton kind of manipulating the case and wanting to obtain information on Lecter and kind of use it to his own benefit, all the while really adding detriment to the FBI investigation. So Crawford tries to calm her down, tell her not to let her emotions get the best of her, and just focus on what she was brought in to do, and that is Buffalo Bill. But now she's going back to, okay, am I going to still be able to finish the academy? Are you going to send me back? Are you pulling me off this case? What's going on? Lecter has been duped though, because with this information that Chilton has obtained, he then informs Senator Ruth. There is a very strange conversation that takes place between the three of them, and Lecter is then extradited to Tennessee. Clarice, however, follows Lecter to Tennessee and asks to gain more information from him, and this in turn upsets Senator Martin, and that gets her thrown off the case. While she's trying to investigate Catherine Martin's abduction, she learns that Lecter has escaped. Crawford, at this point though, has told her to go back to school, which is really a downer for her because she has worked so hard to get to this point. And although finishing the academy is still very important to her, now is not the time. She is smack dab in the middle of both of the investigations of the cold case and Buffalo Bill. She feels that she is on the cusp of solving them, and what has been the most important carrot in front of her now takes a back seat to this. She finds a folder that she had given to Lecter on the case, and he had written her a personal message. And it reveals in there that Buffalo Bill in fact lives in Belvedere, Ohio. So she asks Crawford kind of as a favor to say, hey, just send me there so I can investigate this girl's disappearance, which I feel is interconnected to both of these. And then if that falls through, then fine, send me back to the academy. So Crawford digs into his pockets. He pulls out all the money he has on him because she can't get official travel money through the government at this point, and sends her to Ohio, hoping that she has decided to stop Buffalo Bill and that she has enough information to solve this case at this point. I think that he's kind of grown a little bit of trust and has hope in her at this point. I think he's always had hope in her, but I think that it elevates at this point. He just says, you know, I'm trusting you at this point, so just go and make me proud. Let's have a little Chianti. Okay, so now we have the introduction of Noble Pilcher. He is kind of a side character, but he's important to mention at this point because he is the etymologist that examines these moths. That becomes a pivotal point in ensuring that we find our killer. However, Pilcher does come into play in the end. So once again, we see the introduction between Clarice and Pilcher, where he kind of flirts with her and in some nerdy way asks her out for cheeseburgers and beer. Okay, yes, our character is sexualized. However, this is the first time that you see that Clarice is kind of okay with it, that she is kind of flirting back in essence with Pilcher. So he goes through great detail in examining this moth that was found in a previous cadaver and somehow interlinking it with a very specific coordinate or region where only these moths are found, and it helps her to say, okay, this is in fact who we're looking for. So we're really starting to get a pace to the finish now, because she knows that she only has a few hours at best to save Catherine Martin from her inevitable fate. She has kind of put all the pieces together, and she is getting all this back information from Crawford that FBI has tracked Buffalo Bill to an address in Chicago, but she in fact knows that he is not in Chicago, that he is in Ohio, and this is her one chance. But she also knows that because the FBI has tracked him to an old address, that she has no backup. So she is basically there on her own. So we are now in the long shot. Can she make it? Can she beat the time? And can she inevitably save Catherine Martin from her fate? Now, the cadaver that the moths was found in was that of Frederica Bremmel. She tracks down her friend Stacy and asks her some very investigative type questions that would directly lead her to that of Jamie Gumb's house. And all of these questions are very pivotal in kind of being that exclamation point on the end of the sentences that she's already put together. So Stacy basically is just confirming what she already knows, but she just wants to make sure that she's on the right track, full well knowing that she's pretty much in on this by herself and she has no backup. And if she screws this up, she's donezo, she's goner, because she's already working on an investigation she should no longer be on. She should have been back at the academy, and chances are if she flips this up, now Crawford's butt is on the line, and Crawford's not going to take the blame for this. He's just going to wash his hands of the situation and say, okay, you know what, I gave you a chance, you failed, sorry. And that's sadly sometimes the way that it works. We pretty much find ourselves now at the end of the story. Clarice then rings the doorbell to the house of Jamie. He casually answers the door as if he has nothing to hide, because in his mind he honestly thinks there is no possible way he's gonna get caught. And then a moth lands on his shoulder, the same type of moth that was found in that of the previous victim, Frederica Bremmel. So Clarice is doing all of this insightful inner investigative that she has learned through her training, and all of these thoughts are going through her head. Okay, I don't have backup. If I follow him into the house, I ask the right questions, there's a possibility he might be onto the fact that I'm onto him, and it becomes just that. The story starts to unravel. But instead of Buffalo Bill freaking out, it's almost like he gets a sense of thrill from it. It's like, ooh, I've been found out, now come on, come get me. So she follows him what appears to be in the basement. He kills all the lights in the house, so now they're in complete darkness, and it becomes this cat and mouse type chase because he puts on these night vision goggles so he can see, but she can't. So she has to now rely on her complete training and just go with what she knows. So she reaches for her pistol, she gets that ready in the go motion, and she starts listening for sounds. And as soon as she hears him cock his gun, she inevitably cocks hers first, shoots in the direction that the sound is coming from, striking Buffalo Bill and killing him dead, thus enabling her to go into the basement, get the lights on, and rescue Catherine. Yay for Clarice. Now, while all of this wonderful thing is happening for Clarice, remember we still have Dr. Lecter. So Dr. Lecter has one final blow, and there are two officers that he convinces during dinner time to bring him some raw lamb. Now, of course, the process in working with Lecter, as Chilton said early on, was a considerable nuisance, and we see this with Pembry and Boyle. Now, Pembry and Boyle are very minute characters, but they are very important to mention because this is the final scene that we see Hannibal the cannibal, and it's very important to the next phase of this series. So during the bringing of Hannibal his dinner, Hannibal is able to get these officers in his cell, turn all of their own weaponry against them, murder them both, and switch bodies with Pembry. And when he does that, he escapes in the ambulance with Pembry's clothes on, so the ambulance driver is none the wiser because he's thinking he is taking Pembry for immediate medical attention when he is actually taking Hannibal Lecter to his escape. This, of course, isn't realized until it's much too late, and we have a finality that is, for the most part, positive because we have a rescue on Catherine Martin. We have kind of a I owe you one from her mom, Senator Ruth Martin, like, okay, you did a good job, you saved my girl. I'm not going to say it out loud, but I'll do you a solid later. And Lecter has made it out alive. So how does a very recognizable face make it? He gets plastic surgery, of course. So we leave Lecter in what appears to be a very posh hotel setting with bandages from plastic surgery, ordering his fave, wine, of course. He's very perturbed by the man who delivers it, the scent of his watch alone. So he has a very keen sense of smell, and I love that quality in him because that just gives him an ook factor. Like, ew, he can smell people on a different level. I guess that's what cannibalism is all about. But we end on a very unique note between him and that of Clarice. And he basically sits down and pens a letter to her. And in this, we kind of get a finality of peace within Clarice, and we get a sense of Hannibal Lecter is on the move. And I want to take this directly from our novel, so I'm going to take us to the letter that Hannibal pens. He's kind of reminding Clarice what he knows, just to kind of still keep that mental stimuli on her own psyche. Well, Clarice, have the lambs stopped screaming? You owe me a piece of information, you know. and that's what I'd like. An ad in the national edition of the Times and the International Herald Tribune on the 1st of any month will be fine. Better put it in the China Mill as well. He then goes on to say, I have windows. Orion is in the horizon now, and near it Jupiter, brighter than it will ever be again before the year 2000. I have no intention of telling you the time of how high it is. He also advises her he has no plans to call, which kind of gives Clarice a sense of disconnect, that she doesn't need to worry, but the investigator in her wants to know, okay, where is he going and what is his next move? But I expect you can see it too. Some of our stars are the same. Clarice. Hannibal Lecter. And then we go off into almost like a dream-like state. On the Chesapeake shore, Orion stood high, so we get the sense that they are in fact sharing the same night sky. On a large bed there lay many quilts, and on the quilts and under them are several large dogs. Additional mounds beneath the covers may or may not be that of Noble Pilcher, which is why I mentioned him before, because did they in fact have those cheeseburgers and beer? We really won't know until the next book. But on the face of the pillow, rosy in the firelight, is certainly that of Clarice Starling, as she sleeps deeply, sweetly, in the silence of the lamps. I give this book 4 stars. I absolutely loved it, but I couldn't give it 5 because it made me sick to my stomach. I love psychological thrillers, and I find the more I dive into them, the more I love them. But what kept me from the 5th in this instance is I found that I really don't care for cannibalism and the descriptive that comes with cannibalism. It makes me physically ill to my stomach. So, looking forward to finally reading Red Dragon, because I think that's going to give me a better understanding of the backstory of Hannibal Lecter. I think in that story he's probably going to be the forefront and the main character. And then I will continue to read on in the series, both the 3rd and 4th book, even though they don't fall in the spectrum of harrowing horror. Now let's pick a new title, shall we? And I've added some more titles too, and a new harrowing horror video is coming showing you the new titles. Okay, closing my eyes. La 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 la. New title for April. Oh my, this one's hard to open. Goodness. Ooh, The Woman in Black, Susan Hill. April's title is The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. Until next time, friends, I will see you real soon. Stay creepy. Bye.